I can't tell you how much I have learned from animals that correlates to people. So, if you can successfully learn to listen to animals, you can definitely learn to listen to people. And everybody knows about reading livestock, right? If you're around livestock, you learn to read livestock. And then that livestock will teach you then how to read people as well.
What are the secrets to success in raising sheep? For Wyoming rancher, shepherd, and world champion stock dog trainer Wendy Auzqui, the answers lie in our attitudes, our powers of observation and communication, and our willingness to cooperate with, rather than battle against, nature. In this episode of Voices from the Field, Wendy has a conversation with NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist Linda Poole, focusing on raising Rambouillets on an integrated cattle, sheep, and hay ranch in the northern Great Plains. They also talk about why our minds are like puppies, a story about the power of Pop-Tarts and creativity, and lots of deep wisdom about having a life of joy and meaning in today's world. Let's listen.
Welcome, friends and listeners, to another installment in the ATTRA podcast series called She's Raising Sheep, which features stories of amazing women and their flocks from around the world and especially in the U.S. I'm Linda Poole, a shepherd and an NCAT ag specialist working out of Montana. And today I'm really excited to welcome Wyoming rancher and world champion stock dog trainer, Wendy Auzqui. Wendy, welcome.
Thank you, Linda.
I first met Wendy several years ago when I was looking for help learning how to communicate with my little border collie, Bud. And Wendy was the right person to go to because she's the one who first trained this amazing little dog. And when I was there, I learned about Wendy's ranching operation and the sheep that they run. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to invite her here today. Wendy has a lot of information on the internet about her and from her, and I'd like to read a piece off of her website as an introduction. In that, she says, "My father taught me how to successfully communicate with livestock. My mother taught me how to successfully communicate with people. My past is a colorful collection of adventures: jockey, barrel racer, team roper, colt starter, and finally my latest love, dog training. I have owned several breeds. My dog of choice is Border Collie. My hope is that I can now share my experience with others who would like to, who would also like to improve their communication with dogs and livestock." So, Wendy, that just makes me want to say, go for it. Share your experience about communicating with dogs and with livestock. Is that something that you can do to get us started here today?
Yes, that's what I do on a daily basis. I can't tell you how much I have learned from animals that correlates to people. So, if you can successfully learn to listen to animals, you can definitely learn to listen to people. And everybody knows about reading livestock, right? If you're around livestock, you learn to read livestock. And then that livestock will teach you then how to read people as well. So I do a lot of private lessons, and I have to be able to read the livestock, the dog, and the person. And then I have to adjust my hat accordingly so that all of those things can learn something from me. I have to speak to the person in their language, I have to speak to the dog in their language, and then we have to speak to the livestock in yet their language. So huge learning curve here. When you let livestock teach you about communication, to me it's the most refined communication there is, because a lot of it is done non-verbally, right? For instance, here's a story. I was going to share my little bunch of training sheep. We run about 700 head of sheep, and we have a shearing crew for that. But then I have a little bunch of sheep that I just keep here for training dogs, like 30 head. And my personality is, I can do that. Doesn't mean I can, but my personality says, oh yeah, I can do that. So I ordered some clippers from Amazon, and I got out my tank top so I could, look at these buff arms while I'm shearing sheep. Because I had quite this fantasy going on in my mind about shearing sheep, right? And here's what the sheep taught me. I got the first sheep, And I was trying to remember where the sheep shear started, and I was pretty sure it was on the belly. So I would start on the belly, and this thing, oh, she fought me and fought me and fought me. And she made me mad. I called her names. I tied her up and sheared her. I let her go. I was dripping sweat, right? I just was totally sweaty. And then I said to myself, hey, why don't you listen to the sheep? Maybe the sheep has an idea of how this is done. So I got the second sheep out, took a deep breath, and I started to shear. And if she kicked, I would stop shearing in that spot and I would move to another spot. And she would lay still. And what happened was a few sheep later, with every sheep, I learned something new. But what I really learned was to listen to the sheep. And if I was doing the right thing, she was totally compliant. If I was doing the wrong thing, she would let me know. And honestly, I'd have to say that goes to horses, cows, dogs, especially. So in the dog world, the border collie's brilliance and their willingness to learn, adapt, and please, all those things, if you can listen to the border collie, not only will they help you do your job, but they will teach you about yourself, what you're lacking, what you're good at, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. They show me a lot of weaknesses. And if I listen, I can then change who I am, which makes for a better relationship and better communication with the dog. And every dog requires something different from me. And if you're open to that idea, they will teach you. So, to go a step further, if I take a dog out to train, I need my mind to be totally open and blank. That shouldn't be hard because that's kind of who I am, anyways, right? Totally open and blank. But when I'm training that dog, I can't be like, I wonder if I shut the coffee pot off. Oh, you know who I need to email? Oh, I got to call that guy. If that's running through my mind, I am sending a very messed up signal to my dog who is like, I can't get on the same page with you. But if I go to the arena and I have a blank space and I have an open mind, then I put an image in there that I want. So let's say I'm working on the stop and I send my dog, and in my mind, I have a beautiful picture of him just sliding to a stop. And when I ask for the stop, he's reading the picture in my mind and he's almost always doing that thing for me. But I'm giving him an expectation through my energy, through my thoughts, through that visual picture in my mind. Now, if I was thinking about what I had for breakfast, he could not pick up on that. So, horses, I started with horses when I was young, and my dad was very specific about talking to horses. Now, he maybe was a little bit rougher than myself, but he was a man. They use a little bit of force. And when I took his method, I filed the edges down and I made it softer, and I did more listening than I did talking when I talked to horses, dogs. And then that also translates to people. If you want a good relationship with a person, be the good listener and then talk second. I'm trying not to drown you in this information because I'm sure you have more questions in this, but one last thing I'll add to that. I had a dog come to me from Canada that another gentleman bought and sent directly to me to be trained. And when I got her, she was really subdued. She was doubtful. She worried. She just had a lot of issues and she acted like she couldn't be herself. And so I called Buzz, the owner, and I said, Buzz, I'm going to take all the screws out of this dog. I'm going to lay the screws on the table. I know where the screws go, and I will put them back in one by one as necessary. When I did that, this dog turned a corner, and she's the dog that won Calgary last year. So as our relationship and communication improved, I could gradually put those screws back in and tighten them as needed. And she has become like a phenomenal dog because I took the time to listen to her. And she was trying to say to me, I want to go fast, but I've never been allowed to go fast. And I'm like, I'm not scared of speed. Go ahead, girlfriend. Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to fall off into a rabbit hole of dog talk if you're here for sheep. So you just keep me on the narrow, straight and narrow.
Well, it all goes together, Wendy, and what kind of underlies all of the She's Raising Sheep series and what we do at NCAT is really trying to think about adaptation and having a good life in agriculture, taking care of our land, of our livestock, producing healthy food. And, you tell stories about dogs and horses and people in your life that really gets to what I think are, kind of like the core principle of success in all these things. And some people would call it, like Fred Provenza would call it, relationship or communication. I think of it really as connection, and the connection can only happen if we are observing, and we can observe best if we go in, like you say, with an empty mind. I don't think it's like empty. I think what it is more like what we talk about in Zen as a beginner's mind, and openness to what's there, that you really see
Yeah.
what the reality is, and then you focus on what you want to have happen, and then you observe how it goes. And listeners, when I went down with Bud to Wendy's, one of the first things that happened is, so Bud hadn't seen Wendy, how long had it been? Like
Oh,
five,
it's
6.
been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I hadn't had Bud very long. He's an adult dog, but it's like Wendy trains the entire team. She trains the communication in a team, or at least that's my take on it. And so as soon as Bud got out there and started working with Wendy, it was like, oh my gosh, look at that dog work. So this means it's all about me when things go
Right.
wrong, because there's not a problem with the dog. And the problem was the communication. And this long winding story comes around to what you told me. The single most important thing I could do was quit watching Bud,
Correct.
to look at the sheep, and in my mind put those sheep where they needed to go, and trust that the dog was going to do it, and focus on the sheep and what I wanted to accomplish. And because it was like I was, I guess my way of thinking about it, I was focusing on the problem instead of on
Correct.
the goal. This is one of the key things about success in life and in agriculture, is it's so easy to get locked down into what's going wrong or what could go wrong, instead
So
of
true.
what am I trying to accomplish, and how can I get there, and how am I actually doing right now?
I'm going to tell you this before it leaves my mind. I'm writing a book, and one of the chapters is focus. So, this is just one story about focus, but I had a dog with super tight flanks. Like, he just couldn't get close enough to the sheep, and I didn't want that. He needed to work further from his sheep because he was affecting them at that distance. And I picked on it and I picked on it. And then I thought, no, 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 I'm focusing on the thing that he doesn't have right now. So I'm giving energy to that thing. So then I decided to back up and focus on all the great things that he did. And gradually those tight flanks widened out and they totally went away. But it's because I quit focusing on them.
So where you put your energy.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's do back up just a little bit and frame up for the listeners, Wendy. What is your agricultural operation like? Who do you farm and ranch with? Where are you at? Can you kind of paint us the picture of your agricultural life?
Sure. When I was a team roper, I fell in love with another team roper, and we got married and moved to his family's ranch here in Claremont. I was in Gillette, which is like an hour down the road. But so we moved here in 2003. So on his family's ranch, we run around 700 head of sheep and around 350 head of cows, depending on the year. And it's very complementary because the sheep eat what the cows don't. And if you have a good year with sheep, might not be that good of a year with cattle. You've kind of got something else to fall back on. It's labor intensive because of two species. Like, we put up hay, we calve cow calf pairs. Our sheep thing is more of a range project, meaning we see the sheep a few times a year. We see them when we shear. Then we put them in smaller bunches and we kick them out in the hills and they lamb. We do not go out there when they're lambing. We stay as far away as possible. As most people know, at least with our sheep, if you show up while two lambs are sleeping, the ewe might run off and never come back. So we just stay away. Then we gather them in June to dock, and we get a good count on lambs and see where we're at. And now we can handle the sheep a little more specifically because the lambs are on the ground. Then we turn them back out into another pastures, and then we gather in September and we wean the lambs. So honestly, we shear, we dock, we wean, and other than that, the sheep kind of do their own thing. Once in a while, we'll move to a different pasture, but they pretty much do their own thing. So there's not a lot of labor with them. And I have to say, when you wean lambs, because we've done both cattle and sheep, and when you put cows and calves in the corral, you don't even have to pull the calves off before the cows are bawling and noise, right? And then when you take the calves away, it's bawling for 3 days or more. And I've always been impressed with sheep. We leave the sheep in the corral and we trail the lambs up to the hayfields where they'll stay for 30 days and nobody says a word. Not one sheep says a word, not one lamb. It's the silence of the lambs. They just walk away from their mothers and they go to grass. Then we come back and we get the ewes and we take them back to the hills, and I I'm just mesmerized by the silence of that. It's like they're all okay with it. And I just don't understand why there's such a difference in sheep and cattle.
How old are the lambs when you're weaning them, Wendy?
So they're born in May and that's in September.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what breed of sheep are you running?
They're Rambouillet. Sometimes we have a few Columbias. What we do is we have the white face ewes and we breed to black face bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So we have mainly meat lambs. We don't save any replacement ewes. We buy them.
Mm-hmm.
My training bunch are bought as yearlings or as lambs. They weigh about 85 pounds when we get them. I train them for a year, train dogs on them for a year, and then they go out and be with the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, actually, you do kind of train the sheep.
I do. Yeah, they're easily trained.
Yeah, yeah. So I wonder how much of that has to do with kind of the very efficient life cycle that a sheep has in conjunction with the rhythms of our land in the northern Great Plains. It's just like the length of the summer and the length of the time that the ewe is lactating and the length of the time that the lamb has to learn to eat and develop a rumen. It all kind of fits together, where cattle, they take longer to mature, and you're actually weaning the calf at a physiologically earlier phase than what the lambs are at. At least that's my little
Yeah.
crackpot theory. And I've seen the same thing. And it's one of the things that I really love about sheep in country like ours that has a lot of drought and that has very seasonal grass, is that sheep are just so well adapted to it. I'm curious about the way that you're managing your sheep, where you're only seeing them very rarely, and it sounds like they're in big pastures and moving from one to the next not very often. So how do you tell when you're going to move those sheep? And does the pace of moving them, or the situation, the grass situation a year, does that change any problems you might have with parasites or with predators, or the need to like have mineral or supplement out there? Is there any monkeying with that, or are they just kind of like wildlife that you can gather and sell?
In the beginning, they were like gathering antelope because they had not been acclimated to dog work. I can tell you that our dogs have made gathering like incredibly smoother, more efficient. They used to try to get away from us, right? We would go on horseback or on side by sides, four wheelers, and they would act like they were gathering, but given a corner or a draw, they were gone. They were trying to escape us. And once we have took my training bunch and dumped them into the big bunch every year for 20 years, they are now, if they see a dog, they flock, they group, and they trail. And I'm like, wow, should have done this years ago. But anyway, so the grass determines the rotation of the sheep. If they're out of what we call sheep grass, then we move them to another pasture. And honestly, our water situation is not great. So what we could do if we wanted, and we have, we could open the gates and shut the water off in the pasture they're in, and they would move themselves. But that's no fun because my dogs don't get a job. So, so we actually move them, but we could do it that way. And I don't see any problems really with, we deworm them and we give them shots when we shear and then when we dock. And we have coyotes, but we also have a full-time trapper. So sometimes what we do is we get a count in June when we dock, and then we get a count on the lambs when we ship. And there has been years where the count difference is 200 head of lambs. I mean, it's a big number
Wow.
because our country is really rough and the coyotes, they're out there. Yeah. We have some eagle things as well. Of course, we can't do anything about that, but yeah, the numbers are definitely affected by predators. I would say that's our biggest problem. And we don't do guard dogs. I guess in the past, my father-in-law had guard dogs and he does not want to do that again.
Hmm.
I, I don't know why, but we don't do guard dogs. So we have a full-time trapper and my husband goes out and he'll shoot some coyotes, but other than that they just kind of got to survive. When we put them on the hayfield in the fall, if it's wet, sometimes we'll get a little foot rot, but other than that they pretty much trim their own feet in our country, and they do an excellent job of weed management. So yeah, but they're kind of hands off here, and we have too much going on. We're calving, we're putting up hay, we just don't have the time to do it any different, really.
Mhm. So the input time for your sheep versus your cattle is quite a lot lower. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people who listen to this podcast are people who are just contemplating starting something with sheep, and they
Yeah.
might be looking at, am I going to start a cattle enterprise, or maybe I'm going to move from cow calf to stocker, or maybe I'm going to move from cattle completely over to sheep or mixed herds and stuff. So what's your advice to people who are trying to puzzle their way through whether sheep might be a good fit?
Well, a couple of things. I think your forage, if you don't have sheep forage, your sheep won't gain like they should. Most people know this, but sheep are kind of picky eaters. When we feed them hay, my little bunch down here that I use for training, they pick all the fine stuff and the leafy stuff and they leave all the stems. So then I have some calves that I use for dogs as well, and they go up and clean up the stems. So that's kind of the same scenario when we're on the range. We have cow feed and we have sheep feed, and that's why we can run both species here. But if you didn't have sheep feed, I feel like you would be going backwards with sheep. So if your forage allows for both species, they really complement one another. But I think that's the first thing to find out is what kind of grass and what do I have to feed my sheep. The other thing is a perimeter fence. If you don't have a good perimeter fence, your sheep will probably be checking out the neighbors and your predators. What do you have for predators, and how do you want to manage that? I would love to have the guard dogs. I think they do an excellent job. We have neighbors that also have sheep, and they don't have guard dogs either. So I don't know what it is about this area. I feel like it's our pastures are so big and so rough that we don't have one flock of sheep out there. We have a bunch of 20 and a bunch of 50 and a bunch of 60, and they do these smaller flocks, and I think a guard dog might run himself ragged. You'd have to have a huge amount of dogs, in my opinion, to make that work where we live. And I think that's why our neighbors as well don't do the guard dogs.
Huh. That's really fascinating that you've seen the sheep that they go into these smaller flocks. I'm a real fan of Fred Provenza's work. He was a professor at Utah State University who looked at all sorts of behavior and relationships between soil and plants and animals and people and all these different things. And I've talked with him, the cutting edge of range management is management intensive grazing, where you block all your animals into a small area, usually with electric fence. And
Yeah.
then you're moving those animals in these tight groups every
Yep.
day or 2 days or 3 days, and you're moving them all around. And the thought process that many people see behind that is that it was based on what they understood that bison did back before there were fences and
Sure.
all of us white folks out here carving the up with fences. And what Fred told me is that, yeah, during seasonal migrations, there would be these huge herds of buffalo that were going across places. But most of the year, what they were is they would fracture into small family groups that were built around the dominant females. So mom and grandma and aunts and sisters and all the kids would be in these groups that would be somewhere from 20 to 50 or 60 animals that would be kind of almost territorial.
Right.
They would set up their little place, and there'd be this group here and that group there and this group over here. And that's really how it worked out here. And that's definitely how it works with antelope and with deer and with elk here where I live. And so I think this is fascinating. I'd be really excited to see what the range condition looks like there. If you've been doing this for years, to be able to compare that. And, you know, at NCAT, we're always thinking about return on investment.
Sure.
You know, it's been shown that you can pick up your grass production by this idea of, you know, marching your livestock like armies in a very specific way and tightly bunched. You can improve your grass production and your soil health by doing that. But how much did it cost? And but maybe also, you know, I've wondered about in terms of animal performance, because what I see with my sheep is I have much lower needs for added minerals. If my sheep can go around and choose and just go over and have a few bites of sagebrush and then a few leaves that have fallen off the cottonwoods, and then go eat grass the rest of the day. So
I think there's something to be said for letting nature do its thing. I feel like we can improve on that maybe to a degree of adding mineral or finding water sources but honestly, I think the best thing is to let nature do what nature does. For instance, our calving operation, we calve in March this year. That was a bad idea, but we always calve in March. And so it's the old thing that, you know, that's what we do. But honestly, I think that's the wrong time of year. You got to fight with weather. You got to keep them in a confined spot, which causes a number of issues, you know, cows wanting the same calf, bacteria. And right now it is so wet in Wyoming and so cold, and ours are all in a small spot because of that. Yeah, it's probably not going to be great and optimal, but it's what we got to do. So John and I, my husband, had a great talk, and his father is still here on the ranch and kind of calling the shots, but we've decided this next year we're going to move calving way back and see. I feel like if a calf was born in May, he could just contribute all of his energy to growth. And I feel like the calves born in March, it's just survival, just trying to stay warm and live. And I don't feel like there's much growth going on at that point. And it's so labor intense. And we're not 20 anymore. So, so I feel like if you can give Mother Nature a chance to do what she does, I think that makes more sense than fighting with it. If I was in charge, yeah, we would not be calving in March, that's for sure. But until that day, yeah, I'm not in charge.
yeah, and you know what makes sense also makes dollars, saves
Yes.
dollars. You know,
Yeah.
it's been shown that, you know, the quality of life for the people who are part of this, the profitability of the operation, as well as the health of the animals.
Yeah.
Just like you say, if you can be in sync with nature, it's like it lets nature pick up so much of the work that
Correct.
otherwise we have to pay for and do ourselves. And I'm not 60 anymore, so I'm totally a fan of kind of working along with nature. You know,
Yeah.
another piece that you said in there that I think is reality for so many people in agriculture, Wendy, is being part of a multi-generational operation. And,
Right.
you know, the communications and the relationships and all that, it's not just between you and your dogs or your dogs and your sheep, it's between you and the rest of the family.
Sure.
And I wonder if there's any kind of words of advice about how to succeed in that. And just as a little background for this, I think I read that your husband's family's background is Spanish Basque. And my mentors originally were French Basque.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
they were so helpful about helping me learn how to do all this with sheep. But the underpinning of it was that this is not women's work. And
Oh boy, yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, can you kind of
Sure.
tell us about how you work within the human environment of your ranch?
For decades, NCAT's ATTRA program has been the trusted place to find practical and cutting edge answers to sustainable agriculture questions. But what if you're the one with the great idea? The forum on ATTRA's new website connects you with other farmers, ranchers, and land managers who are sharing their practical know-how. Stop by at attra.ncat.org and join the conversation.
So a little backstory is my husband John, his dad's dad came here from Spain as a very young person, maybe 14. Now, I've just heard this secondhand, so my facts could be slightly off, but this is how I remember the story. So when he came here, he got a job herding sheep for ranchers. And instead of paying him, they gave him land, and that's the land that we are now living on. So that's an incredible paycheck, right? Like and we used to have land on the mountain as well. And in the old days, they trailed from Claremont all the way up to the mountain for the summer. I mean, I think it was 10 to 14 days just to get to the mountain with ewes and lambs. And then in the fall, same trip back. I mean, wow, that's a lot of work. So, anyways, I feel like it could be the heritage of these people, but women were more looked at like maybe you have the kids, you cook the meals, and maybe you could feed some bottle lambs, but you weren't really involved with the day-to-day process. And I came from a ranch where I was cheap labor as a child, right? So when you could swing a rope, you were going to catch something with it. When you could drive a tractor, you were driving a tractor. You might be 7 years old. I do remember my dad would feed hay off the back of the pickup and I would drive, and I could either steer or push on the gas, but I could not do both.
Me
So
too. Yeah, it was like teamwork with my sister and my brother.
yes, exactly. And we did throw him off the pickup a time or two, but we had to learn, right? So when I got involved with John's family, I mean, I came with a set of skills. I'm not bragging, but I'm saying I knew some stuff, right? And I think his dad recognized that and allowed me to use my skills, and I think he decided, wow, she might be more help than she's problematic. We might be getting more out of her than we thought. And so I was given quite a bit of freedom to do things. And when I got dogs, his dad would be like, hey, can you and a dog go move the lambs? I mean, this would be, 700 head of lambs from one hayfield to the other. And I'm like, of course we can. So I was really given some freedom that women before me were not given, say, his mom. And I have the best in-laws. God, they love me. I love them. But I do feel like when I first came, maybe there was a little bit of how come she gets to go she gets to go ride and rope and do these things while we're making cookies and cleaning house. But we've all come to a really good spot, and I feel like we are in a really good spot as far as if you're strong in that area, that's your area. If you're not strong in that area, that's somebody else's area. So we get to share the workload based on our strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's made things run really smooth, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's a true gift when we get to be and express who we really are in the work that we do.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons I would guess why you've had so much success winning the World Stock Dog Championships, not once but twice,
Yeah.
and with two different dogs, and then this beautiful ranch and the integration of your whole family. To me, a big part of it is just somehow it's you being who you are and acting through love and having, a real clear image of quality of life that you want to have. And,
Yes.
you've mentioned that you're writing a book. Can you tell us a little bit about writing the book and what you want people to get out of that? To me, it's a big part of what are you imparting to the world beyond some really great dogs?
Yeah. Well, I think the writing actually came for myself, to learn about myself and to put things on paper so that I didn't forget some things about life and where I came from. But I actually would really like to get it published because there's a little bit of entertainment value with it. I mean, I've done some dumb things and they're funny. Uh,
We
there
all have.
is.
Not everyone admits it though.
Oh yeah, I laugh at me more than anyone else. It's kind of a way to keep your life not too serious. That's kind of the underlying current of the book is things are going to happen. Let's just have fun and laugh about it, not worry. There's a little bit of communication between people and dogs and livestock. There's just my perception on things, which it's unique the way I perceive things a lot of times. So other people find humor in that, I think. And it all started with a sleepless morning, like 3 a.m. I could not sleep. I had all these thoughts running through my mind, and I woke up my husband, best man in the world, and I said, I'm hungry. And he said, what do you want? And I said, I want a Pop-Tart with butter. So I know he went and made me a Pop-Tart with butter, brought it back to bed. I ate it, but I still couldn't sleep. So then I got up and I just started writing down the things that were running through my mind. And that became chapter one of the book. And it's not like I say, oh, geez, I need to go write. It's just I'll be sitting here and something will come to me and then I go write it down. So if I'm not inspired, I'm not going to write it. But if something inspires me, then I'm just going to write it down. The funny thing about writing is when I'm writing, it just flows out of me and I write it. And there'll be a lot of mistakes, spelling, punctuation, grammar, you name it. I'm not gifted with that. And then I'll go back later and I'll read it and I'm like, did I write that? Because it almost sounds like it's not me. Can't explain that very well, but it almost feels like something else writes through me, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm even entertained by it. I'm like, oh, that was funny. I remember that day and that was funny. So I guess I don't know if it sees the light of day and it gets published. I want people to just say, "Oh, you know what? Nothing's perfect and we can have fun with it and we can find joy in it. We can learn to communicate with people and even ourselves. Like there's a certain amount of communication that's just between you and you, and that's forgiveness, grace, mercy. I just think you need to lighten up on yourself. And then when you do that, you will also be less judgmental of others. And God, I just think the world needs so much of that. So I guess I guess if that answers the question, I'm trying to get people to just be who they are and not judge themselves and not judge others and just enjoy life because you get this one chance.
Yeah, that is lovely and important, and to me, an essential piece underneath of that, Wendy, is that I feel like you can write a book like that, where a lot of us need a book like that because we couldn't write it on our own. And partly because when you were talking about that blank mind, you're
Yeah,
not you're not operating out of somebody else's manual.
right.
You're
Right.
you're operating out of seeing things clearly and focusing on goals rather than on problems. And that idea of creating forgiveness and mercy, kind of, give yourself a break. I think that that's so important. It's a difficult thing for some of us, and so I'm very hopeful that you'll get that book written and have it out in the world where it can help people. I do have just kind of little odds and ends that I'd like to bring into this discussion, and this might go back to what we were just talking about. And part of it seems to me like you get a lot of this by just being a good, quiet observer and listener and
Yes.
thinker. But are there other places where you get information or you learn things? Is it from have you had mentors, or do I'm always going to YouTube University, where you can find all sorts of crackpots and geniuses and ideas from something that has nothing to do with raising sheep, but has everything to do with it. So how about you? Where do you learn?
Lots of places. I also go to YouTube, and if it resonates with me, I listen, and if it does not resonate with me, I do not listen. I let my gut feeling, if you want to say, kind of dictate where I'm going to get my information. And if it's my head, sometimes your head will say, well, that sounds odd, but that's your head. And the head is just a computer full of memories. If you've got some downloads in there, but you have nothing that's not original. I mean, when you hear something and it doesn't line up with anything you've ever heard, your brain will say, well, that doesn't sound right. But your gut is the one that decides, or my gut is the one that decides. So my brain's like, well, that doesn't sound right. But my gut says, oh, I want to hear more.
Yep.
So then I hear more because the gut is the one that heart, gut, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like that might come from a bigger place than us. Like the brain is a computer, but if the heart wants to listen, to me, that might be a higher source than myself saying, yeah, check that out, listen to that. So, as far as teachers, as far as people that taught me about dogs, my neighbor was very influential. Allison Gerard, Joe Woodbury. Then I read some books, but the problem with books, which I hate to say because I'm writing a book, but the problem with books is is if you're going to try to learn to train your dog through a book, I feel like the person writing the book would have to know how your dog works, how your dog thinks, how your dog learns, and if they don't know that, you're trying to train your apple based on an orange. I This is hard to explain, but you need to interact with that particular dog to know how to train it. The other things I go to YouTube for are, I don't want to say self improvement because I don't like that term, but I want to expand my knowledge. Joe Dispenza, Alan Watts, these are people that interpret what Wayne Dyer, people that interpret maybe the Bible differently or life differently. Anytime they speak about energy, I'm all ears because I know that we are energy and we need to be able to perceive with our energy and not just our computer mind, because like I said, the mind is a list of things we've put in there, and when we try to change that, the mind says that does not line up with what we did yesterday, and then we're stuck in a rut. So go with your gut and go with your heart. If it feels good to your heart, listen to it, and don't worry about your mind so much. It will catch up later. And then if you can keep an open space in your mind, I feel like you could get a download from that higher intelligence. If your mind is so busy all day with what happened before or what's going to happen, past and future, then there's no space for a download. And I get downloads when I give my mind space. So I try to find that space. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it echoes with a lot of what I do on YouTube too, because I don't have or I don't know of a community that here in the middle of nowhere, the official middle of nowhere of the US. I don't have like a community that I know of that focuses on centeredness and listening and
Yeah.
and frankly with me it's meditation and
Yeah.
just being able to slow things down and get focused, because otherwise my brain is exactly like a whole litter of untrained border collie puppies out in the middle of a bunch of sheep. It's just like everywhere,
Yep.
going 1,000 miles an hour, creating chaos, having a
Yep.
great time, and
Yep.
just making a really big mess.
I understand completely. I feel the same way. I feel like my mind is supposed to serve me. And when it's doing those things, it's really helpful. But when it starts dragging me around by the nose to places I didn't even want to go, then I need to be aware and say, oh, no, no, we're not doing that. We're going to stop and we're going to count to 20 and we're going to get back on track, because I feel like if you don't keep check on it, it will take you places. And a lot of those places I dang sure don't want to go. So,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, you know what it makes me think of, Wendy, are the commands that you use with border collies.
Yeah.
So the focus, sending them on a flank. I want you to stand here, stand
Yep.
and come by. I want you to go clockwise. This is the direction we're going because we have something to accomplish. And when you get out there, I want you to stand and look and think and listen to me. It's like, I need to use those same commands on my brain.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, if you're not aware, you're not aware. So I don't know how else to say that, but if you're not aware of what's going through your mind, you'll get to the end of the day and it's kind of like when you drive and your mind is doing all these things. Somebody else is driving the car because your mind is doing its own thing. And if you're not careful, it will do that with you all day long. And you'll get back at the end of the day and you're like, wow, I went a lot of places that I really didn't even want to go or need to go. Awareness, I guess, is the only word I can come with. You need to be aware of what's going through there. And that way, you can create that space that when you're dealing with a dog or an animal, if you don't create a space for them to reply to what you're asking, it's pretty one sided. And you've had a conversation with people like that, right? And all you keep doing is looking at your watch, trying to find a way to leave because it's so one sided. And that's the same with animals. We have to let them have an opportunity to reply to what we're asking, what we're saying, what we're wanting. Sometimes I'll have something go wrong, or it feels like, oh, this is going so wrong. And then I stop and I'm like, no, this isn't going wrong. This is the thing my dog needed to learn today. A sheep left the bunch and it's running through my hayfield Mach 1, and my dog had to clean it up. At the time, I'm like, oh no, chaos, mess, oh no. And then I watch my dog go out there and clean that mess up. And I'm like, thank God I had that little mess. I just saw that my dog is capable of doing that thing I wasn't sure he could do.
Ah,
So sometimes when you're in the middle of something that you're like, oh no, if you'll stop and you'll wait, it might be the very thing that you really did need. This is a little off that same rabbit trail, but my car wouldn't start one day. I don't know why. It started the day before. That car would not start the very next day, and I needed to get to Casper. My mom showed up and said, well, we'll just take my car. And I don't know why, but I'm 100% sure there was a reason we did not want my car to go. I don't know why, but so what I'm saying is be flexible, be okay with that. Instead of that ruining my whole day, my car won't start, now I got to reinvent my day. Just go with it and find joy in it. And I don't know who said this, but I use this a lot. This can only serve me in a positive way. So if you feel like, oh my God, this is unraveling, I had an idea of what I wanted and now it's not there, stop, take a deep breath and say, this can only serve me in a positive way. And 9 times out of 10 for myself, it does. I'm like, "Ah, I'm so glad it happened like that."
wow.
But the ability to allow and be flexible, it changes everything. Mainly your attitude, but I think when your attitude changes, that's what changes everything else.
Wow, this is profound information, Wendy, and you're answering my questions before I've asked them. I feel somehow like that, there's communication between minds, even when they're far apart. So,
Absolutely.
one of the things I wanted to talk about was the big challenges that face wool growers in our part of the world, the Northern Great Plains right now, and what your ideas are on how to surmount those challenges. So if you had to say kind of what are the big looming things that are in front of people who are raising wool sheep in Wyoming and eastern Montana, what would you think they are, and what would be some ideas about what we could do about those things, either separately in our own operations or together?
That's a big one. So there's predators, drought. Drought is probably one of the bigger things. Tough winters, which we had been getting by pretty well, but this one has been relentless and been a very hard winter. So I think you need to be flexible. I think sometimes, I know for myself, the first 30 years of my life, maybe I was going to force this thing. This is what I wanted. This is what I was going to get, and I was going to force it. boy, boy, did that not work out for me. When I started looking at everything in a different light of, I'm not going to force it. If this isn't working, I'm going to turn my focus maybe a quarter of a turn this way, and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to see if something unfolds for me. I'm going to quit pushing on that thing, and I'm going to see what else unfolds. And honestly, I am not in a position to do this for the ranch because I'm not in command. But if I was in command, we would be flexible. We would change. We would allow. We would quit forcing. Uh, for instance, we talked about this earlier, but calving this time of year, we're working against Mother Nature, and she's gonna win. She always does. So why would we continue that? Why why would we keep setting ourselves up to fight with her when she says just wait, just wait it out, have these calves when the weather is doable. So I don't feel like I'm answering your question completely, but the amount of things that could work against you as a rancher or farmer are huge, but we chose this lifestyle, and I think if we would listen, it would teach us some things, and we could learn to quit forcing things and learn to allow things. I feel like if you push, something will push back, right? So I kind of feel like even the predators here, if we like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to kill every coyote I see, I almost feel like we're creating something to push against. Whereas what if we tried and said, boy, there'll be a lot of sheep people that just will not want to hear this, but what if we said, we're gonna control what we can and not worry about what we can't control and just allow that to kind of take care of itself. But anytime I think you go to war with something, it's gonna fight back. If you look at drunk driving, got a war on drunk driving. Did it go away? No. Anytime you fight with something, I think you'll get it to fight back. So what if we change that a little bit? What if we didn't go to war with Mother Nature? I don't I don't know. I don't think I'm answering your question completely, but what if we tried to find a way to get along and get the best from one another and your neighboring ranchers maybe, instead of just going to war with the things that we're gonna. Yeah, I really don't know how to explain it. I feel like I'm just digging myself a deeper hole. So tell me again, is there a better question, or can I answer that question better, I guess?
The fact that you're asking that question kind of answers the other question. Is there a way that I can answer this situation better? The drought. It's just been, we're recording this in early April, and my sheep can walk out over the top of a 5-foot corral on a snowdrift right now.
Yes.
We have this great big winter, but it's following almost 3 years of incredible drought.
Right.
Half our annual precip, and we never got much to start with, less than a foot.
Yeah.
And so, several years with 4 or 5 or 6 inches of precip. So drought is a big thing in this landscape. And with the way things are going, this swing between extreme droughts and then extreme winter weather, all the tornadoes that they're getting in the east and hurricanes on the coast and all this, it's a fact of life. And
Yep.
if we define our happiness in needing to control our environment,
We're not gonna be happy.
yeah, we just signed our certificate of desperation,
Yep.
and I don't want to I don't want to do that. I think that the most important thing that we can have, it's always been kind of like in my mind, what's more important? Is it this awareness of reality, just really being able to observe, or is it
Yep.
hope, and to me, thinking that we have to have control is the antithesis of both those things. It's just the opposite. So anyway, I feel like you answered my question, and I
I
think
think
that
I think I answered it in a very strange way, but I don't. I could not honestly give you an answer to even address those things. Like I won't. I don't know the answer to drought. I know that moisture takes care of drought, but like I don't know the answer to drought. I don't know the answer to predation. I I don't know any. If I did, I would be selling books right and left, and people would never have another problem with drought and predation, right? But
But I think I'm disagreeing with you on that, Wendy, because
Okay.
what I think I heard you say was learning to live with that, with reality. We work with some folks from the Blackfeet Nation up here in Montana, and one of the sayings I've heard them use is that which is given.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
are living with that which is given.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. Drought happens, predation happens. What if we thought of it in a different way and learned how to live within that context? And the other thing I heard you say was community. Maybe you get together with your neighboring ranches and you think about what together you might do. And
Collective consciousness, maybe.
yeah, see, I think you're answering the questions,
Okay.
and probably in a better way than the idea of, one of the usual responses to things like drought is, can I drill another well or get more water rights? Can I irrigate my way out of this?
Yeah.
And that's less and less of an option all the time, especially in the Western US where our rivers are going dry, and our
Yeah.
groundwater, the Ogallala Aquifer, and it's, those things are limited, but learning how to reframe it and look at it in a different way. I feel like you answered my question
Well,
brilliantly.
I have another one of my favorite things. I think this comes from the Bible, but it says, "As you believe, so be it unto you." Okay, so to me, if I believe in miracles, I can have them, and I do have them. I could give you a long list of miracles that happen for me. If you don't believe in miracles, I don't think you'll see one. If I believe, there was a year when our drought was so bad and we moved cows, it was a dust bowl. You couldn't even see the cows in front of you. And miraculously, we had calves that weighed almost as much as the years that we weren't in drought. So you tell me what, yeah, we don't want to see it, we don't want to feel it, but I don't feel like it worked against us one bit. I We still sold calves. They still weighed quite a bit. We still got good money. But I think my believer was, I believe this is going to work. And somehow it did. So as you believe, there'll be that unto you. I don't know. If you don't want to believe in anything good, that's fine. That's totally fine. But I think there's a supply and a demand. I think if you go around professing, we're dry, we're dry, we're dry, and you keep throwing energy on being dry, I think you can have that. And the real challenge comes when you work with other people that are not on the same page. They're professing dryness, and I'm saying, God, look at us. We got big, heavy calves. Like we talked about community. If we could get on the same page and we can expand our belief to be whatever that is. What do you want to believe? Let's all get on that same page and believe that. What Wouldn't that work? It seems like it would work. I don't know. I'm willing to try.
Wow. I can't tell you how much I've learned in this discussion, Wendy, and in other discussions that I've had with you. And we're at the end of our time here in this, and I'm going to have to go back and listen to this podcast several times to harvest a lot of the wise things that you've shared. But to close this out, I wonder if you have just, some final words that you'd like to give, especially to women who either are raising sheep or thinking about raising sheep. What does Wendy Auzqui have to say about that?
Well, number one, listen. Listen to your land. Does your land have the ability to have the livestock you want? Listen to your livestock. They will definitely tell you things if you listen. Meaning, if they want to go over there and eat on the crick and you've said, no, I'm going to fence that off, you're not listening. You're saying, no, sheep, we're doing it my way. But what if they found something over there? For instance, my husband says, we need to spray these weeds. I said, why would you kill your sheep feed? That's what our sheep eat. Why would we spray that? But it's that war against something. And it's fine if he wants to have a war against weeds, that's fine. But I feel like that's what our sheep eat. So why would we kill what our sheep are eating? So so listen to the things that will talk to you if you give it a chance. Use patience. If you're going to get sheep, you'll need some patience. You'll need a dog. I I don't know how people do anything with sheep without a dog. If it's not working, be flexible. If you have a drought year and you just cannot pull it off, let your sheep go and let them live somewhere where they can eat and buy sheep again another year. Or, don't force things. Just find the joy in it. Don't that focus thing. Don't focus on what you don't have. Focus on what you do have, and that's freedom. There's so much freedom when you are ranching and farming. I Freedom is probably number one. I'm my own boss. I give myself a lot of days off, but I also work hard. But I'm in charge of that. Nobody's making me punch a time clock. So the freedom of this lifestyle is huge.
Wow. Wendy, thank you so much for this.
Thanks for having me.
Like I say, I've learned a lot. I am so looking forward to this book when it comes out. And I'm looking forward to coming back down and visiting you with Bud for another tune-up of me and my border collie as a team. And I can't thank you enough for this interview.
Thank
I
you.
wish you
Thanks for
well.
having me. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Wendy.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.